Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're tracking what is honestly one of the most astonishing journeys in human history, the 2,000-year evolution of Christianity. I mean, how exactly does a movement that started with a single historical figure, a Jewish man named Jesus in the Roman province of Judea around 30 AD, evolve into this massive, globe-spanning faith? Through ancient empires, huge schisms, global colonization, and even modern suppression, this timeline is absolutely fascinating. To really wrap our heads around the scale of this journey, we just have to talk about one specific number: 2.3 billion. That's how many Christians there are today. That is nearly a third of the entire world's population, living and worshiping in almost every single country on Earth. It's a massive, massive contrast to the faith's incredibly humble origins in the first century. So, how do we get from a handful of followers in the ancient Middle East to literally a third of the globe? Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1, the Apostles' First Steps, the Early Expansion. Let's go back to the first century. Picture this: small, fiercely loyal groups of followers walking the dusty roads of the Mediterranean to share what they called the gospel, or the good news. And the sheer speed of this expansion across the Roman Empire is just staggering. Right after the widely historically accepted crucifixion of Jesus around 30 AD, things accelerate incredibly fast. By 36 AD, a man named Paul experiences a vision of Christ on the road to Damascus. Paul's mission to spread the faith becomes absolutely crucial. He is wildly successful at winning converts as far west as Italy. Fast forward a bit to 42 AD, and tradition holds that the Apostle Mark sets up a church in Alexandria, which actually lays the groundwork for today's Coptic Orthodox Church. And by 100 AD, the four Gospels that make up the New Testament are completely written. That formed the solid, enduring foundation for the religion that we still see right up to the present day. Now, the geographic reach of these early followers might have stretched even further. According to tradition, in 52 AD, Thomas the Apostle arrived in India and established several small Christian communities there. However, and we want to look at this totally impartially, we do have to point out that most historians dispute this specific claim simply because there's a lack of hard historical evidence. Still, even the tradition itself highlights the incredible outward momentum of these early decades. Moving right along to Section 2, Constantine and the Empire, Imperial Acceptance. So, we shift now from an era of widespread persecution by emperors who consider themselves divine to a period of real imperial acceptance and power. The 4th century is where the geographic map truly starts lighting up with institutional backing. It sets off this incredible domino effect. It starts in 301 AD, when King Tiridates III makes Armenia the world's oldest Christian country by proclaiming it the state religion. Then comes the real pivotal moment, 312 AD. Roman Emperor Constantine reportedly experiences a Christian vision right before the Battle of Milvian Bridge. The very next year, he legalizes Christianity across the entire Roman Empire. Building on that huge momentum, by 325 AD, he convenes the Council of Nicaea with an estimated 300 bishops. The goal there was to resolve theological disputes and really organize the faith. This all culminates in 380 AD, when Emperor Theodosius passes a law defining Orthodox belief, which puts Christianity fully on the path to becoming the official state religion of the Roman Empire. There is a pretty drastic shift happening right around this time. Expansion moved completely away from early grassroots missionaries and became this highly effective, top-down medieval strategy. It was basically a formula. Step 1, convert the ruler. Step 2, the ruler outlaws the old gods. Step 3, the entire kingdom formally adopts the new faith. It was a rapid and, well, sometimes brutal method. Across the empire, Christians attacked old temples, destroying them, or converting them directly into churches. Later on, you see figures like the Frankish king Charlemagne extending his rule across Europe, and he converted new subjects to Christianity, often quite literally at the point of a sword. But as you might expect, massive expansion naturally brings massive internal tension. In 1054, theological and political disputes between the Greek Eastern Church in Constantinople and the Latin Western Church in Rome caused a huge fracture. It was a permanent breaking of relations known as the Great Schism, splitting the faith into the Eastern Orthodox Church and the Roman Catholic Church. And shortly after that, as the Byzantine Empire faced immense pressure from Seljuk Turks, Pope Urban II called for the First Crusade in 1095. He offered forgiveness of sins to Catholic Christians who would take up arms to reclaim the Holy Land, which unfortunately led to centuries of violent conflict. And this brilliantly illustrates our next major pivot. Section 3, the Age of Discovery, Maritime Exploration. That previous era shows us just how deeply intertwined the religion became with state power and physical geography. And the end of the 15th century, it was explosive in pushing those boundaries across the ocean. In 1492, Christopher Columbus reached the Americas, which completely paved the way for profound religious expansion. The very next year, in 1493, the Pope issued a bull, an official papal decree, granting Spain the right to claim these new lands. By 1494, the Treaty of Tordesillas literally drew a line on the map, splitting the New World between Spain and Portugal. But, the irony here is that just as European powers were expanding Catholicism abroad, back home in 1517, a German priest named Martin Luther launched a scathing attack on the Catholic Church's practices. This triggered the Protestant Reformation and completely fractured Western Christianity. To really understand the intense, conquering mindset that was driving the Spanish and Portuguese expansion, we just have to listen to the primary source from that 1493 papal bull. It explicitly urged that the Christian religion be exalted and spread, and, quote, that barbarous nations be overthrown and brought to the faith itself. That wasn't just a religious mission. It was a deeply political, state-sponsored mission of imperial expansion. Ultimately, this resulted in two very different colonial approaches to spreading the faith in the Americas. Down in the south, across New Spain, Peru, and Brazil, the Spanish and Portuguese largely imposed Roman Catholicism. They utilized forced conversions and actively attempted to eradicate indigenous religions. Up in the north, European Protestant settlers, like the Puritans, arrived seeking religious freedom for themselves. Their efforts at conversion looked a bit different. For example, missionary John Eliot successfully printed a Bible translated into a native Massachusetts language by 1663. Though, to be fair, these translation efforts still had pretty limited overall conversion success when compared to the sheer demographic spread of the European settlers themselves. All right, moving into the modern era. Section 4, Global Missionary Movements, the 18th and 19th centuries. Driven by the Great Awakenings, this became the age of the heroic, globe-trotting individual. So instead of top-down royal decrees, this era is defined by highly dedicated men and women taking on immense personal risks. You have the Baptist minister William Carey, often called the father of modern missions, translating the Bible into 7 different languages in India. Though it's worth noting his presence was heavily resented by many Hindus and Muslims, and actually contributed to the 1857 Indian uprising against British rule. Then in Africa, you have Scottish missionary David Livingstone, who became the first European to reach many central parts of the continent. Meanwhile, Mary Slessor immersed herself in the culture, learning the local language in Nigeria to preach. And way down in the South Pacific, Samuel Marsden preached the very first Christian sermon in New Zealand in 1814. But we can't really separate these individual missionary micro-narratives from the macro-politics of the era. To put that into perspective, just think about the sheer scale of European claims in Africa by 1914. During the high age of European imperialism, the rapid scramble for Africa meant that 90% of the entire continent was claimed by European nations. Christianity traveled hand in hand with this colonial carve-up. Actually, it was completely intertwined. The missionaries' religious goals and European imperial expansion were heavily linked. And of course, in some regions, this kind of foreign influence met intense resistance. China, for instance, had largely resisted Christianity, sparking a massive and violent backlash known as the Boxer Rebellion, where thousands of Chinese Christians were killed. Yet, despite this incredibly intense resistance, the relentless dedication of these missionary networks meant that the extensive groundwork laid after 1900 eventually led to a massive surge. By 1945, there were around 4 million Chinese converts and thousands of newly constructed churches. Let's bring this into the 20th century. Section 5, the modern Christian map. As we look at the 20th century, we have to ask, how did this massive geographic footprint survive its absolute greatest ideological threat in the modern era? That threat, of course, was the rapid rise of communism. Communist governments in the Soviet Union, across Central and Eastern Europe, and in China actively attempted to dismantle the church and completely suppress worship. Yet, the religion proved to be incredibly resilient. When governments in the Soviet bloc eventually fell, Christian churches reemerged with huge popular support. And even today, despite incredibly tight state regulation in communist China, there are many millions of practicing Christians. If anything, it proves that institutional suppression rarely ever extinguishes grassroots belief. 2,000 years. When we look back at this sweeping historical timeline, we see a faith forged by a staggering variety of forces. From the early loyal apostles walking Roman roads, to powerful emperors enforcing a state religion, to maritime colonizers dividing up the globe, right down to individual missionaries translating scriptures in remote villages. It really is the combined, complex impact of all of these groups over 2 millennia that has shaped the global religious landscape we see today. Which leaves us with a pretty profound question to wrap up this explainer. After surviving ancient empires, massive theological schisms, the incredibly violent colonial era, and modern state suppression, what exactly will the next era of this 2,000-year journey look like? Because as history shows us, the map is always changing. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep exploring the